Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our January 2023 Board of Education meeting. I would like to start by acknowledging the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. Welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Trustees, I wonder if we could have a mover to approve the agenda, please. Thank you, Trustee Bayo, and a seconder. Trustee Carmichael, do we have any changes or amendments to our agenda this evening? Oh, no, not seeing any hands. All right, so I'll call it to a vote. All those in favor of the agenda? And that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Moving on, we have approval of the minutes of December 12th, 2022. May I have a mover? Thank you, Trustee Kwan. And a seconder? Trustee Gagnon, thank you. Are there any changes or amendments to the minutes? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you, Trustee McNally, and that is unanimous. All right, thank you, folks. Moving on, do we have any business arising from the minutes? All right, I don't see any. Len, again, if I don't see you folks, just feel free to unmute and let me know if I've missed you. We don't have any student achievements or district presentations this evening, and so we're at A7 of our agenda, community presentations. For this portion of our agenda, each presenter has 5 minutes. I will let you know when you're to, well, in the last minute, just so that you know to wrap up. This evening, we're going to kick things off with the Greater Victoria Music Educators Association President, Cindy Rompf. The floor is yours and welcome.
Thank you. I just, can you hear me okay? Yeah. I'd like to just say something short, and then I'd like to give up the rest of my time to Dr. Collins, if that's possible. Okay, great. So good evening. My name is Cindy Rompf. I'm speaking to you as a music educator and as the president of the Greater Victoria Music Educators Association and the past president of the BC Music Educators Association. The elementary strings review that was presented on January 16th OPS meeting is already being talked about in music education circles around the province. Over the past 10 years, instrumental music programs at the elementary, middle, and high school levels have been cut in school districts across our province. The BCMEA executive are concerned that other school districts will use this document to justify further cuts to current music programs. The most dangerous sections of this document are on pages 11 and pages 20 to 22 of the OPS agenda pack-up, where it states that engagement in music has no or very little impact in the cognitive or academic skills of its participants. I'm speaking to you now to go on the record in refuting this finding in hopes to prevent cuts to music programs across our province. I've shared with the trustees other highly respected studies and research that show strong cognitive and academic benefits for students who study and play musical instruments. In addition, I reached out to Dr. Anita Collins of Australia for help. Dr. Anita Collins is an award-winning educator, researcher, and author in the field of brain development and music learning. She is internationally recognized for her unique work in translating the scientific research of neuroscientists and psychologists to the everyday parent, teacher, and student. Thank you, Anita, for taking the time out of your busy day to speak at our school board meeting. May I please introduce you to Dr. Anita Collins.
Thank you very much, Cindy, and thank you for having me all the way in Australia. I know it's your evening, it's my day over here. It's very hard to know where to start because there's so much I could say. However, having read through the report, which is very well prepared, I'd like to talk a little bit about the research which says that there is no cognitive benefit that has been found within music learning and brain development. The studies that were quoted in the report are very, very important studies because they shone a light on some areas in the research which need to be improved. That's very common in research. It is always a cumulative sort of developmental part where we need to improve our practices so that we get better and better results. While they did that important job since 2017, when most of those papers came out, they have been widely refuted in terms of the statistical model they're based on and some of the things that they chose to leave out in order to get to the conclusion they came to. So they had some very good benefits, but some things that needed to be looked at very carefully. And I would warn against taking a small number of research papers written by a very small team that then says that all the other research does not have any legs to stand on. Basically, it is missing out on the larger field of the research, and it's taking a small group with a very specific intent in mind and saying that there is nothing to be achieved from that. So I would warn you against that. When we speak about the benefits of music learning on an instrument specific at this year, sort of, as I've read in the report, year 5 level, the things that the students are learning at that age, very importantly, are their executive functions. These are the functions that help them learn all the way through school, but are very, very important in that 8 to 12 year age bracket, and particularly around attention, around memory, making and retrieval, about cumulative knowledge, analytical thinking, divergent thinking, many of the things that we value in adulthood and we value in the economy, in those things that actually produce the new and innovative approaches. It's very, very important. Most of the people who study STEM and who achieve wonderful things have studied significant amounts of music in their own childhood. I would add to that between 8 and 12, their empathy networks are being developed. Music enhances these significantly. And one of the greatest things that we do within education, no matter where we are, is helping our students to understand empathy, empathic behaviours, pro-social behaviour, and a feeling of social cohesion. All of these are enhanced by music learning when they are done in a group setting, and they enhance the networks in the brain, which then lead to the positive behaviour that we know we all would like to see in the next generation. The other thing it does at the age group is prepare the students for their cognitive fitness for the period of time which is coming for them, which is puberty. A lot of things change in the brain at that time, and the better set up the brain is from that 8 to 12 age, the better that the brain will deal with the many things that happen with it through puberty, but then also how they're learning remains consistent through that time. It helps them in that middle school, junior high school time very, very much to continue their learning to make sure that they stay on track. The last thing I would say, I'm not sure how many more minutes I've got, but that high quality education systems around the world have consistently identified that music education is a core part of that. And I think you may lose more if you take this out of the availability for your students than just music education, and then just the opportunity for a performance on assembly, for example, or playing to our grandparents at home. There's more that you will lose in the later years of education and into the next generation than just taking away music. You're taking away a very powerful tool for cognitive development, and one which will help the students, the teachers, their parents, the economy. All of these different areas are benefited by students who can have brains that operate at their very highest level for as long as they possibly can in the healthiest way they can. I'll hand back to Cindy if there's anything else you'd like to add.
And just so you know, folks, you have just under 4 minutes remaining. I don't know if this is a forum that usually do this, but I'm here, I'm all the way in Australia. Would anyone like to ask questions? We don't normally, given that you've offered.
I know, I can see that
3.5 minutes left.
I do have questions. Maybe Karen.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of questions. I mean, I was, I've done most of this research. I've been on that side of it. But I just wanted to say that I truly, truly appreciate you coming. and speaking to us and giving us that other side. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Yeah, Trustee Bio, go ahead.
I also don't have a question, but I also work as a teacher on call, and I sing with students like every time I'm in the classroom. And I see firsthand because my mom does Mother Goose programming, and it's just, especially that social emotional part was really lacking in that report. And so thank you for speaking to us today, and thank you for talking about that as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think also from, we've all had different experiences through the last 2 to 3 years, but the benefits to that social and emotional part and the well-being and the steadying in the terms of anxiety for our students is very, very important at this particular time. We have to get them back on track in order so that they can continue with their learning. I don't know about where you are, but in Australia, we know that our students have moved 6 to 9 months backwards in things like literacy and numeracy. And as they come back into the school, if they're not feeling connected with it, they're not feeling connected with their community, within themselves and comfortable and able to learn, we're never going to catch this generation up. As I said, I think you may be losing more than you know if you choose to stop the program, because it has these knock-on benefits that, or knock-on problems if you don't have it, that may result in difficulties with behaviour. That places, from an economic point of view, a really significant amount of time and effort and more money into behaviour management. There could be all sorts of things that come from that. And we know from the research that it can help to settle kids back into school, back into their learning, give them long-term goals, settle their self-regulation, and help them to return to the main thing that you are all trying to do wonderfully, which is to educate them.
So we have 1 minute and 10 seconds. Right?
Oh my goodness. We have a question.
Oh,
from
Trustee
Rob.
Painter, go ahead.
Chair, with your permission, Dr. Collins, I'm curious if the research has indicated any kind of minimum amount of instruction that students would need on an ongoing basis for this to get these beneficial effects.
Absolutely, it has. We're looking at a minimum of 2 years ongoing learning. So that means learning every single week. The general music lessons of having the music lessons a couple of times a week. The younger they are, the less they need, which is so wonderful. It needs to be done on an instrument, so it has to be external to the body. They need to read music, traditional notation, so that they get the sound to symbol connection. They need to learn kind of in a lesson, which means they need to sort of be stepped along through what's the next note, what's the next technique, but they also need to have experiences in playing in groups so that they can develop particularly their executive function, and they need to perform. And I know that sounds strange. It's not high level performance, but it needs to be raising them up to a goal that they're heading towards. And then it needs to allow them to go through that sort of heightened physical experience when you're nervous, when you're worried, but you still can achieve at your best. And that is a transferable skill to all manner of things in school time, but also in life as well. So that minimum of 2 years, more is always better. But that's the most important thing. That's the formula we have at the moment.
Thank you. And that is our time, folks. Thank you, Dr. Collins, so very much for joining us. Take good care. You feel free to stay and watch our board meeting, but I appreciate you probably are quite busy and have other things to do. So thanks again for joining us. Good night. All right, folks. We have one more presenter tonight. Amy is going to speak to us about late French immersion at Cedar Hill. Welcome, Amy. Amy is a parent. You have kids, your kids are currently in Cedar Hill, is that right?
Yeah, thank you. We have one student at Cedar Hill who's just finishing up his last months in late French immersion, and one aspiring late French student. And I just wanted to also take a moment to say I feel very uplifted by hearing the music conversation, and that's something we live at home and we see at home, and it all comes through our schools, so we're so grateful for those experiences. As introduced, my name is Amy Tusher, and I'm joining you today from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen and Wasanich people. really grateful to be living, working, and learning here. We've had the pleasure of working with a group of parents from the former Cedar Hill catchment area for late French immersion over the month of January and previously to this as well. And my partner Andy and I gave a presentation a few weeks ago at the Education Policy and Directions Committee. And there we really tried to outline the need and demand for late French at Cedar Hill. And so you'll find the presentation in attached to today's agenda. We spoke about the geographic distribution of late French immersion schools in our area and how without Cedar Hill, there's a huge gap in the district where access simply isn't feasible for many families. And we also spoke about the results of a survey we ran showing strong interest, not just this year in our area for late French immersion, but also among families of younger students coming up through the program. So we've been advocating specifically for reinstatement of late French immersion at Cedar Hill, and this is what directly impacts us and the families that we spoke to. But really what we've learned and what we're really asking for is equitable and consistent access to late French immersion across the area. And we've really seen some differences on how different students are able to access this. If SD61 wants late French to be a program that thrives and serves the families, it needs to be funded consistently and predictably year after year. We know that the population is growing, but we also know in late French there are dips in enrollment and ups and downs. And families need to know what's available so that we can plan properly and not be faced with last-minute decisions in January and in June that cause a lot of stress and anxiety for our students. So now that registration is closed, we're waiting for the numbers to come in. But we just wanted to make you aware that the interest in the community is strong. And we know several families who would have chosen late French at Cedar Hill, but the uncertainty caused them to make different decisions for their students this year. So we're asking the school district and our trustees to consider reinstating late French immersion across the district, and this includes for Cedar Hill. We understand it's a budgetary decision and that one FTE is implicated. We just really feel strong support in our area for late French immersion. If the district does decide to remove Cedar Hill as an option, which we feel is incredibly short-sighted, we need to reconsider drawing the catchment areas because students of Rogers Elementary are left with no feasible option for late French, as Shoreline is our district school or our catchment school. We have no way to get there. So thank you very much for listening. And I think you can hear from my voice and my passion that our experience with late French immersion and SD61 at Cedar Hill has been phenomenal. And that's due to the dedication of the teachers. And there is a big community who wants to support late French, and we need the district to provide consistent funding. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate you sharing the slide presentation as well. Again, from what we saw at the sounding committee, that's really helpful. All right, folks, and you had a minute to spare. Our presenters are very quick tonight, very succinct, and yeah, we appreciate you joining us. All right, so we have some correspondence tonight on our agenda. We have 3 pieces of correspondence. I wondered if trustees want to pull out any of B1, B2, or B3 for discussion. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm hoping to pull out B1. I really would like to discuss, there's some questions in there that President Turcotte has posed. And, you know, further to that, I wondered with the grad requirements, you know, can this board advocate to the ministry, you know, around funding and a little more process is how that's brought in. And, you know, further to that, is there other districts who are feeling the same pressures, and can we advocate together? And maybe that's a piece that we put together for Vista or for BCSTA annual general meeting. I'm curious to hear what my trustee colleagues have to say.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Kwan. So folks, any thoughts about where we might direct this letter, or if there's any motions arising or action items. Keeping in mind that, of course, the letters on the agenda, we don't need to do anything with it tonight. We can do something with it tonight. We can refer it back. My suggestion would be to consider either referring it to budget advisory to consider from a budget perspective, and or to ed policy for a deeper discussion. We could also flag it and include it on the upcoming VISTA agenda to see if there's any interest in more regional and coordinated advocacy at the VISTA level. So if folks have a preference. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, I may start us off. I think both would be appropriate. I would probably prefer a standing committee over a budget advisory, because I feel like we'll get the work done and we'll have a motion to refer to our next board meeting. If we refer it to a standing committee, but I also think that it's not either or. We could do both, and we could also ask for it to be added to the VISTA agenda.
Okay. So, Trustee Kwan, did you want to move a motion to refer it to February Ed Policy Committee for discussion?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Great. Can I get a seconder? Trustee Carmichael, thank you. Do you have any discussion before I call that to a vote? Trustee Painter?
My apologies. I was on a different screen there. I just wanted to confirm whether or not that would give us time to actually, should we make a decision to move it on to, God, if we wanted to request a motion go forward, would we have time to pass it at the next board meeting? And I see that our February board is the 27th, which is after the submission date. Is that a factor for us?
You mean for VISTA?
Not for VISTA, but for why can I not even think of our parent, our umbrella?
STA for the AGM? Yeah, it would be too late for submitting it for the AGM, but we could consider bringing it from the floor to VISTA. Let me just double check the VISTA deadline here. I think, let's have a look here. Do we know what the VISTA date is? Secretary Treasurer Stride, I'm just trying to find it. I know we recently got a piece of correspondence outlining the date.
It's March 2nd and 3rd, I think.
Right, okay.
3rd and 2nd and 3rd.
2nd and 3rd, okay. So we would have, thank you, thanks folks. Okay, so yeah, so we'd have time to add it to a VISTA agenda. Does that answer your question, Trustee Painter? Okay. All right, any other questions or discussion before I call it to a vote? Okay, so again, just to clarify, folks, we're going to refer B1 to the February Education Policy and Direction Standing Committee for discussion. All those in favor, show of hands. And that is unanimous. Thanks very much, trustees. Was there anything else from the correspondence that we wanted to pull out and discuss tonight? Okay, seeing no hands, then we're going to move on to a chair's report. So you've got my report. It's included for information. Just wanted to highlight one item that I actually didn't include in the report, but I just wanted to acknowledge with gratitude the Secretary Treasurer who joined me earlier in January to present to the town of View Royal about crossing guard funding. It was a last minute invitation, and I really appreciated the Secretary Treasurer providing the necessary financial information and providing me some backup during that presentation to their mayor and council. So thank you so much for that. Apologies, I should have included that in the report. Were there any questions pertaining to my chair's report? All right, seeing none, again, it's on page 31 and 32 of the packet. Moving on to the annual work plan. Again, it's there for information. Anybody have any questions about the work plan? All right. So that leads us then to our draft minutes. We've got our draft minutes of for information only for the Education Policy and Directions Committee meeting January 9th. Then we have a couple of recommended motions from that meeting. So the first recommended motion at D1B, and this is on page, I'll get you guys to the right part of the packet, page 34 to 37 of our packet. The motion is that the Board of Education of Greater Victoria direct the chair to write a letter to the province on behalf of the board expressing support for an EA standards of practice as stated in the letter from VCPAC on December 5th, 2022. All right, folks, before we get into discussion of the first recommended motion coming from Ed Policy, I just wanted to open the floor to our partners and any rights holders who may be here this evening to share their perspective with the board. So, oh, hello. Good evening, Tracy, welcome.
Hello.
And the floor is yours.
Thank you for asking. And I didn't prepare anything deep because you do have the letter to look at. But, you know, we're all aware, I think, at this point, and maybe some of you aren't, that education assistants in the province of BC can have a varying level of education. Some, you know, we have the 3-week bridging program here, which although, you know, there's some background that people are coming into that program with, is still quite a short time to educate education assistants. And then there are 2-year programs at places like Douglas College and Camosun College. And so what it comes down to is that they're not coming into their work necessarily with the same level of experience, and it can create issues at the school level. You know, extra work for those who do have more experience and trying to provide support off the side of their very limited time. And I just, you know, I really hope that you will support it, because education assistant standards of practice is about more than just their training and experience. It's about regulation of what should be considered a profession, and is right now still kind of seen as that nice grandmother's coming in and, you know, reading to children, when in reality that is a very complex role and should be treated respectfully and as the professionals that, if they all had more of an equivalent set of training experience, they should be. That's about it.
Thank you very much, President Humphreys from VCPAC. Appreciate that. Do we have any other stakeholders that would like to comment, provide a perspective about this? Okay, I don't see any other hands. So trustees, Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thanks. Yes, I'm glad to see this this surface as a former educator who worked with a team of up to 6 EAs. You know, it's a daunting job sometimes, and ability to cope and carry out IEPs for some kids with very complex needs was challenging. So this also, the wish for standards of practice also came from CUPE in 2012. And I've written a blog post about that I think I provided to my trustee colleagues. So John Malcolmson wrote that report. So we've been waiting since 2012 and before for some action on this, and I certainly hope we get it soon. So I'm in favor of anything that would push the government to getting standardized action together on this and providing what EAs really should have.
Thank you, Trustee McNally. Just to confirm, are you moving the motion as well as supporting it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, move McNally.
And can I have a seconder? Thank you, Trustee Carmichael. Okay. All right. All right, let's continue our conversation. Trustees, do we have any more input from trustees before we vote? Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add here, I think Trustee McNally has said it very nicely, but I just wanted to add kind of this level too, where, you know, as a board, we want to be supportive of the staff that we employ, and we want to be supportive of the stakeholders and rights holders that have a stake in our education system. And I think, you know, just reading through these letters and realizing what support they need is a good first step, and that's why I think this motion is there. Part ways, obviously, of course, you know, maintaining a standards of practice is a good practice, but I think it's, you know, same kind of the same level is supporting our staff and our stakeholders and our rights holders, and making sure that you know, we're listening.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. I don't see any of your hands. I just, for my part, I was very pleased to see this come to the committee, and I think that the issue of a standards of practices come on and off the provincial table a number of times over the years, and I think it's high time that it's back, and hopefully we see some positive sort of movement forward that both supports EAs and the important work that they do, but also just supports the system in terms of implementing, you know, a standard. So yeah, so I appreciate it, and I also support the motion. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to call the matter to a vote. So again, all those in favor with a show of hands. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much, trustees. So moving on, we have a second recommended motion coming from Ed Policy that the Board of Education of SD61 Greater Victoria direct the superintendent to work with the Victoria Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils, VCPAC, to develop a communication protocol to support the Parents Advisory Council, PAC, to communicate with PAC members in their school communities. Again, I just want to open the floor to our stakeholders. President Humphreys, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And, you know, again, totally unprepared statements here. The reality is that PCPAC has been struggling with capacity for a while, and so have individual PACs around the district. And so communication is a challenge when you have small numbers and perhaps people, you know, trying to collect information and figuring out how to contact people and figuring out how to give them timely information about things that are very important that are happening in the district. Has been difficult, and it would be really appreciated to have some support on finding a better way to do this instead of trying to individually collect contact information. And in fact, would probably better support privacy if we could find a different way to approach this. That's really all I have to say, and I appreciate that the motion is coming to the table, and I hope that you'll support it.
Thank you very much. Any other stakeholders like to provide comment on this particular motion? Okay, all right, trustees. Let's kick off our discussion. Trustee Carmichael, would you like to move the motion?
I certainly would, Chair. Thank you.
Can I have a seconder before I let you begin? Okay, Trustee Gagnon, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Trustee Carmichael.
It was nice to see so many of my colleagues want to second this motion. And I just want to speak on it very briefly that, you know, as a former VCPAC president, the obstacles that are in place for us at times to make sure that we have, you know, direct lines of communication, not only with the board, but with individual administrations. It's so very important because caregivers and parents have the same goals as the rest of us here, and that is success of students. And we can't do that. We can't ensure that if we're not all on the same page. So I really encourage my colleagues to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Carmichael. Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make a slight amendment to the wording, if possible. in the last sentence, actually, I guess there's only one sentence, but to develop a communication protocol to support parent advisory councils, brackets PACs, to communicate with PAC members in their school communities. Just pluralizing it rather than singular.
No, sounds good. I don't know, trustees, can we do that as a friendly amendment? Yeah, I think, but yeah, okay, yeah, all right. Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else want to speak to the motion? Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, sure, I'll be quick. You know, I think anyone who's been a parent at some point in any district and been involved with PACs at all knows, you know, the difficulties you go through to try to get information out, you know, for any of the happenings. And so, you know, I'm so glad to see this motion brought forward, and I hope that we can, you know, we can find a way to make it a little bit easier for PACs to communicate with their parents.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Yeah, the only thing I would add from my perspective is just that it is the communication piece is just so key. You know, we often talk about the important role that parents play in the education system, and it's that role is enshrined in the School Act, and but yet sometimes we ignore just those kind of process like implementation pieces, and this is just a great opportunity to kind of help facilitate that interaction and that important parent feedback. And so I'm happy to support the motion. All right, were there any other comments from trustees before we go to a vote? Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Yeah, did the oh boy, assuming that this all comes together, will the addresses that PACs have to communicate with their members broadly be individual home addresses, or were you envisioning SD61 addresses as part of whatever protocol is developed to gather the email addresses?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I moved the motion at policy so I could speak from like my own perspective and bring the motion to the standing committee. I didn't prejudge sort of what the protocol would look like. I think that those discussions about the logistics and what's possible really just need to occur between VC PAC and the superintendent. And then I imagine, you know, the board will be updated around what's been agreed. So at that point, we'll be able to get a better sense of what exactly in practice that would look like. The intention of the motion was really just to get the conversation going so that a protocol could be agreed. I don't know, Superintendent, or maybe even potentially President Humphreys, if you had anything to add in terms of Trustee McNally's query.
I can
Go ahead.
I can start. Yeah, I think it will be a conversation moving forward just as to how those email addresses can be collected in privacy domain and then distributed. I think it's a great conversation to have, and I look forward to having it, but I do think there's layers to this that I think we need to just make sure we've covered off before we do anything quickly.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And I also think that, you know, that is a good thing that you raise, Trustee McNally, in terms of one of the considerations that we need for sure.
All right, thanks, folks. All right, so I don't see any other hands. So I'm going to call it to a vote. All those in favor with a show of hands. And again, that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees, and thank you to our stakeholders. All right, so we're moving on to D2, and Operations Policy and Planning Standing Committee. You'll see the draft minutes from the January 16th, 2023 meeting for information only. And we have a referred motion from the January 16th meeting for the board's consideration. And the referred motion is that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, Direct the superintendent to hire and dispatch up to 10 additional QP382 custodial employees for the remainder of the 2022-23 school year, and allocate budget to the custodial relief account to a maximum of $209,068, subject to the availability of budget in the 2022-23 amended annual budget process. And further, to commence conversations with QP382 regarding custodial service levels for the 2023-24 school year and any potential efficiencies. And further, to recommend custodial service levels for the 2023-24 school year, including budget implications for consideration in the 2023-24 annual budget process. Just a reminder, from a process perspective, this is a motion that's referred. So normally what we see from standing committees is recommended motions. This one, the standing committee decided to refer to the board, so the board would have a further opportunity to have another discussion at this table. And I'm wondering too, before we start or offer our stakeholders an opportunity to speak, I wonder if we could just get some clarification from staff around timelines for a decision. So in order to implement the recommended motion, can we just have clarification when the board needs to make a decision around this?
I think I'll lean to Secretary Treasurer Stride, but I think there are two parts to this as it does impact next year's budget. So with regards to allocating funds for this year to hire up to 10 custodians, that could happen immediately, as they could be hired as early as tomorrow. However, the further to the motion did include considerations for the 2023-2024 year. So I think that is in the two parts that it entails. So Secretary Treasurer Stride, I don't know if you have further information on that budget process.
I'll just agree with what Superintendent said. There is a piece that impacts the current year. We're currently working on the final budget, and that will be coming to the board at the end of February. However, like if a decision was made tonight to proceed with that, proceed to build it into the final budget, keeping in mind when we're doing that, whether or not there's enough budget available. And then the other piece impacts next year. So again, we can incorporate it into budget discussions, perhaps at Budget Advisory Committee, and make a recommendation to the board that way. Or decision could be made by the board in advance that could be incorporated into the budget ahead of that.
Okay, thank you both. So presumably then at least by the end of February, if the board doesn't refer the matter to Budget Advisory, for instance, by the end of February, you would need a decision about what to do this year, if anything. Yeah, okay, perfect, thank you. All right, so thank you for that context and clarification. I just want to open the floor to our stakeholders to comment or provide any input around this motion. Yes, President Turcotte, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you for bringing this motion forward. It's been very challenging in our schools, and we welcome the willingness of the board to reconsider, to have another look, to look at the budget to see what can be done. We really appreciate that. One of the first things I learned when I first became a teacher was that what we call the school secretary at the time, our office assistants, and the custodians were, our people that are best friends in our schools. And that has certainly played out in my career. The custodians do so much for the schools. I just think about that iceberg image, right? What we see on the top is a fraction of all the work, everything that they do for us, for the, supporting the teachers and everything they do for the students and the families. So I just want to say thank you, and we appreciate you having another look at this budget item.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. President Humphries, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thanks. I don't need to speak for very long. I just wanted to say that, I appreciate seeing this motion as well, because parents have had lots and lots of discussion at our, district PAC meetings and sort of lots of back and forth and concern about it. So it's great to see this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, trustees. So we've got some options. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Motion to put it on the floor before I speak?
Well, again, it was referred here. So we have some options. So we can have a further discussion tonight, collect more information. We can move a motion to direct staff tonight. We can refer it to budget advisory. We could vote on one part, so the part pertaining to funding for this financial year, and then maybe refer the other part to the Budget Advisory Committee for a decision as it pertains to the 2023-24 budget. We've got some options, so I'm at your disposal. I just wanted to lay out the options there. There might be some others I haven't thought of, but so yeah, so we can discuss it tonight and do nothing with it right now and come back to it, or we can put some motions forward to take some action now.
Okay, well, I'll put my thoughts out for everyone to think about, and we can go from there. But there was an email that had come through from a custodian, which I thought was, there was some really great information in there, and maybe some of the things we might be missing in here. I think there's probably a lot, but I was trying to think of things that maybe we could hit on kind of right away, and that was addressing some of the WorkSafe and JOSH deficiencies. And I wondered if we could incorporate some of that into one or some of these motions, depending on how we break it out. And I just wondered what my colleagues' thoughts were on that.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Kwan. I wonder if we could get some context from staff around some of what, without going into a lot of detail around what the concerns are, but I'm assuming that the suggestion, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Trustee Kwan, is to look at if there's any health and safety concerns, addressing those as a matter of priority when it comes to allocating the funding. Is my assumption correct, or?
Yeah, I think the specific item that was brought up was training and whether it was met WorkSafe standards.
Thank you. I think that sounds like a question for the superintendent or maybe a delegate. So I'll leave it to the superintendent to respond to that one. Just
to clarify, Trustee Kwan, when you say training for whom?
Sorry, I was just, as we were talking, I was trying to find the email, and this is what it says. It says new worker orientation, and it says that our district does not meet WorkSafe requirements.
I think if that is the case, I've not heard that is the case. I know that some of the information we would have had a different opinion to. Right. So I have asked what would occur in the hiring process should there be up to 10 hired. And the first would be to ensure that all absences are backfilled. And the second is that if there are additional staff available, that they would be deployed to elementary schools to focus on the desktop cleaning. So from facilities and Mr. Baggett, that was the first two things. And then from there, it sort of triaged out. But WorkSafe, I believe we're in compliance. So I think that would be something we'd need to go further to investigate, but I don't believe we're out of compliance with that.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, through the chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
I appreciate that extra information, and it sounds to me like that might just be a separate issue altogether that we would bring up with a separate motion, just to do maybe a review of our practices to see where we're at and whether we meet requirements.
Thank you, and thanks for the clarification, Superintendent, and the question, Trustee Kwan. It's always good to clarify these things. Okay, so we've got a couple options then, folks. We can simply table this until, you know, our next board meeting. We could move forward part of it. We could refer part of it to budget advisory. If I don't see anything from the floor, then I'll assume that we're going to table this until a later date once we've had more time to consider it. Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
I move the first part of the recommended motion.
Okay.
That the Board of Education of School District 61 direct the superintendent to hire and dispatch up to 10 additional Cube 3A2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Trustee Gagnon. And do we have a seconder? Trustee Carmichael, thank you. Okay. So, so we're moving the first part, and that again, the first part, just a reminder, pertains to this financial year and to our reevaluation of where we are in February with the budget and what extra funding we might have to allocate for this purpose. Okay, trustees, shall we have a discussion? Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thank you. You know, I appreciate getting more custodians on board ASAP, but I have over the years watched facilities take so many hits. My point is, if we're going to hire more custodians, please let's not just do it for the remainder of the year. Let's commit to having these positions be permanent. Facilities is being, I don't know, just kind of rocked back and forth over the years and felt unsure, I think, of their positions. And yeah, I've seen a lot of anguish from facilities members over cuts and uncertainty in their department. So although, you know, I like this motion, let's get on with it. I can't support it because it's short term.
Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that sentiment, and that's why I would actually move for all three of the motions, because I think the more notice we can give the superintendent and her staff, you know, to commence conversations and some recommendations for the budget process that we'll be going through shortly, you know, I think that just gives them a little bit more time if we can pass those today, because, you know, I think we've had this discussion before where, you know, we don't want to make this decision and then, you know, rescind it or do something contrary to what we're doing now and have, you know, people we hire be laid off at the end of the year. So I think the other two play into that as well. So I would, you know, maybe my suggestion is we move all three.
Okay, so I'm seeing Trustee Gagnon's hand up. So I'm just going to, as the mover of the motion, I'm just going to go to you to see what your thoughts are on this. Thank you, Trustee.
Thank you, Chair. My thoughts, I was not intending to ignore or move past the other two parts of the motion. I just wanted to really ensure that that first part got through tonight, and then having the option to reword or reconsider the further two paragraphs. If my fellow trustees are satisfied as is with the other two paragraphs, I am comfortable either withdrawing or amending my motion, not a motion, to include the final two paragraphs.
So, okay, so I think from a process perspective, withdrawing it would be the cleanest way, because these other things are not kind of amendments really. Yeah.
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Gagnon. We appreciate that. Okay, so I'm hearing that trustees want to see all three aspects of this moved. So do we have a mover for all three? Okay, Trustee Gagnon, you want to move all three, and then a seconder? Trustee Kwan? Okay, there we go. All right, so we're back to the drawing board, but I think I'm starting to see where we're going with this. So does anybody that's already spoken want to just further speak to the other aspects of the motion that are now being moved? Or shall I move on to some other potential speakers here who would like to speak to all three, or just to the motion, the new motion? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, so does that mean you folks are ready for me to call it to a vote? I'll see some heads nodding. Okay, all right. I don't want to rush us, but I'm happy to call it to a vote. All right, so all those in favor with the show of hands. Okay, wonderful. Thanks, trustees. That's unanimous. Okay, so moving right along then, we are at D3, and that is our Budget Advisory Committee, and I will pass the floor on to our Secretary Treasurer.
And I actually talked to him doing this, so I'm happy to do it, or I can pass it over to Trustee Gagnon for that.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Whatever you had planned, I'm happy with. So Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
I can go ahead.
I mean, I can do it to Secretary Treasurer. It's no real insult to me. So in the pack up on page 42, you can see the Talking Tables event report, which goes over in detail the events of January 5th, 2023 at the CFB Esquimalt Rainbow Room. 6 of us trustees were there and many staff were there. It was a good night of discussion. You can read all about what was discussed in the pack up. I'm not going to go into detail because it's like 80 pages and lots of us were already there. But if you do have questions or concerns, feel free to reach out. We also have the revised values and guiding principles, which have been discussed at multiple budget advisory committee meetings. Those can be found on pages 128 and 129 of the pack up. And I suppose I could do this, but I will move that the Board of Education of School District 61 Greater Victoria approve the revised values and guiding principles as presented.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Gagnon. Before we move that to a mover, or before we proceed, I just want to give our stakeholders an opportunity to speak to the motion, which is that the board, as Trustee Gagnon has already said, approve the revised values and guiding principles. Do we need to, I assume everyone's had an opportunity to read the revised portions of the values and guiding principles document. And just want to open the floor to our stakeholders if they have any comment on that. All right, so seeing none, so we'll go back to trustees then. Thanks, Trustee Gagnon, for moving it, and can I have a seconder? Trustee Kwan, thank you. All right, any discussion? Hearing, oh, sorry, Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Just a point of clarification. So with these recommended motions for the budget advisory, the values and guiding principles, and I guess lumping in the terms of reference as well, if we approve the revised and approve the revised for both, does that still leave it in draft form for the budget advisory to make recommendations, or is that then, does that set everything in stone?
Yeah, so it's the board is the final decision maker. So if there's something that the board wants to change or amend about the proposal, then we would do that tonight, or we would table that. I mean, I suggest we would do it tonight because we want to wrap this up because the work is ongoing and it happens very quickly between now and April. So if there are any changes that the board wants to see to the revisions that have been made already, any further changes, then if folks could move those in the form of an amendment, that would be great. So would it be helpful to my colleagues to, sorry, Trustee Cohen, go ahead.
No, sorry, just one more point of clarification, and just going from what I know from last year. So when we start the budget advisory again at the beginning of next year, does that again go back into draft form? Like, I'm just worried that we're not, you know, enforcing something on subsequent years that, okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Just-
no, we would review them every year. Yeah. And
Thank
so
you.
there'd be an opportunity for the new committee or a new board, if there were one, to revisit that. And yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So is there any further comment or discussion around amended values and guiding principles as presented? All right, hearing none, I'm going to call it to a vote. All those in favor with a show of hands. And again, that's unanimous. All right, thanks, trustees. Trustee Gagnon, did you want to present and move the next recommended motion, which is the revised terms of reference for the committee?
Sure, Chair. Thank you very much. So the revised terms of reference can be found on pages 130 through 132 of the packet. Similar to the values and guiding principles, there are a few, but not too many edits for that. But if there are any, I can move it or I can wait for feedback.
Yeah, I think I'll just once again offer our stakeholders an opportunity to comment on the revisions before we get into debate. Okay, I don't see any hands. So yeah, so Trustee Gagnon, if you want to move that, and I just need a seconder. Trustee Carmichael, thank you. All right, discussion, folks. So again, we're looking at the revised terms of reference. All right, Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm seeing, you know, two principals, two reps from the GVTA, et cetera, and one rep from each of the Songhees, the Esquimalt Nations, Ufia, and the Métis Nation. And I would move that we replace one representative with two representatives. It may not happen, but I would like to give those groups the same you know, number of people, number of representatives that other groups have.
Okay, so Trustee McNally is moving a motion to amend the terms of reference to include two members rather than just the one. Got it. Okay. Yeah. Can I have a seconder for that amendment? Trustee Painter, thank you. All right. So some discussion around the suggested amendment to the terms of reference. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
I really like this spirit that the motion was done in. I believe that this was actually discussed at budget advisory and there was some questions asked around it, but of course my brain can't recall it right now. I'd have to look back in my notes to find out why. So I don't know that I could vote on this at this time, but I would welcome referring it back to budget advisory with that question to figure out why we didn't have more there. I'm not sure what everyone else feels about that.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Kwan. I don't recall the discussion. I wonder if staff or maybe the chair of the committee could just clarify if there was any discussion around that. Yeah, Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My only real recollection of it would be that we may have felt that the two paragraphs after the list where we are speaking about how the board staff will attend meetings with Songhees Nation, Esquimalt Nation, Ufia, and the Métis Nation of Greater Victoria when invited and or when any concerns and or clarity is required. So we may have felt that that covered it. I'm not, that's my only thought towards that.
Thank you. Okay. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Yeah, just to close, I'll wait and if other people have something to say.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I just to clarify, Trustee Kwan, are you moving a motion to refer the terms of reference back to the Budget Advisory Committee, or is the clarification provided by Trustee Gagnon sufficient?
Chair, we do have a motion on the floor, don't we? Mine to
Yes, we
change
do. Yeah,
one
no,
to
you're
two.
right. We do. Thank
We
you,
need to
Trustee
deal with that
McNally.
one.
Well, then
We'll
I'll
dispense of it first. Go
I'll
ahead.
clarify. I'm happy. I mean, even if we don't have that, as long as we have, I'm just worried about having quorum. That's the only thing, is that if we don't have the representatives that we need, but I guess with an advisory committee, we don't need quorum.
I think that the quorum in the terms of reference wouldn't require all of them to show up. So if there were two each, it wouldn't require all of each. It would require none of them to show up. I mean, it does speak to that in terms of reference, so
Right.
that wouldn't be an impediment. Superintendent, go ahead.
If I may, I would recommend or suggest that we reach out to the four houses to ask them if they wish to be represented in this. I understand the spirit and I certainly appreciate that. I wouldn't want to look like this is being done without their voice included.
Thank you, Superintendent.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
Chair, just given that my motion is on the floor,
Yeah.
and the superintendent's comments right now, perhaps I should withdraw that motion. And I mean, I assumed that the four houses were consulted if they're here. They were not. They were just written in.
I think what the superintendent is pointing out, and superintendent, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if there were additional representatives included in the terms of reference, that before we were to do that, we ask for houses whether they would want to see two representatives. Yeah. So I think it's just about asking them first whether they'd want to see two representatives or not.
Okay, well, I'm not quite, I'll withdraw my motion, and I'm not quite sure how to proceed here in expectation of the superintendent or Dr. Nimi reaching out. I don't know how this is going to happen, and I'd appreciate knowing how the contact will be made and when we'll know.
So we could do that by motion. So if we don't want to approve the terms of reference tonight, but we want to direct the superintendent to consult with the four houses about revising the terms of reference to include two representatives for each of the four houses, then we could just do that by motion. Or we could vote in favor of the terms of reference as drafted, and then do a second motion directing the superintendent to go back to the four houses to ask, and then we could bring back a revised terms of reference once we get that clarification. So there's some options. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm probably breaking all kinds of bylaws here by talking this much at a board meeting, but really in terms of, decolonizing our process and reconciliation, my true feeling is as many people who want from that, from the Songhees and the Esquimalt Nation, Ufia and Métis Nation can show up, if anybody who wants to come should be able to come, but I don't know if that's, that's my feeling. Anyway, I'll leave it with the superintendent and the meeting here.
Thank you, Trustee McNally. So just to clarify then, folks, do we want to be directing the superintendent to undertake that discussion with the four houses? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to have a mover then for that motion. Okay, thank you, Trustee Kwan, and a seconder. Thank you, Trustee David. All right, do we have any discussion? No? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to call it to a vote. All those in favor? All right, we got it. It's unanimous for the minute, for the purpose of the minutes. It's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. All right, so we've got a direction to the superintendent to go and undertake that discussion now. Now, what do we want to do with the terms of reference? Do we want to just table them then for now until we hear back from the superintendent? How do we want to dispense of these? Should we table them?
Yeah.
Okay, and all right, so till when? Do we want to just say that we, a motion to table the draft terms of reference until the superintendent has consulted with the four houses regarding membership or representation, something like that? Does that work? Can I have a mover? Thank you, trustee Bayo and trustee Gagnon. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor with a show of hands? And that is unanimous. Thank you again, trustees, and thank you to the superintendent for your input on that one. All right, folks, we are going now to the timeline. Trustee Gagnon, did you want to read this one into the record?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. On page 133 of the packet, there are two proposed revisions to the board-approved timeline. The first revision was moving the date of the talking tables from November 24th, 2022 to January 5th, 2023. And the second was moving Budget Advisory Committee meeting number 8 from April 20th, 2023 to May 4th, 2023.
Thank you, trustee Gagnon. Do we have any input from our stakeholders on this before we get into debate? No, okay. All right, trustees. Trustee Gagnon, are you happy to be the mover for that? Wonderful. And can I get a seconder? Trustee Kwan, thank you. All right, any discussion about the amended timeline? Trustee McNally, go ahead.
I just I missed the first amendment. I can see the second one. It's highlighted and clear to me, but I just don't see the other one. It sounds like we're amending something that already happened. And I'm probably wrong about that, but I don't get that. How can you amend something that already happened? Unless you just want to correct a schedules for the, a schedule for the record.
Yeah, I think the purpose, again, correct me if I'm wrong, was just to let the timeline reflect the actual date of the meeting. But
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. All right, folks. Do we have any further discussion or questions before I call it to a vote? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, the show of hands. And that is unanimous. Thank you again, trustees. All right, so we're moving into our district leadership team reports, and we'll start at E1 with the superintendent's report. Superintendent. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you, Chair Duncan. You'll
problem.
see beginning on pages 134 through to 139, my report for the month of January. I added some additions to my memo to further clarify the motion that was passed with regards to the hiring of the additional custodians. I also added some questions and updates that had come throughout the month with regards to the current capacity at Tillicum, as well as the equity scan. And to conclude the report is a gratitude. I think that the facilities department throughout the winter holiday did incredible work to keep the snow cleared, the melting snow out of schools, the roof leaks, and every other thing that came at them. I know that they did not get a break, but our schools were ready to open again without delay. And that was in very much part to their extra effort. So just wanted to thank them, the facilities department, for all of their extra efforts. But I am sharing my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have with regards to any parts of the report.
Thank you, Superintendent Whitten. Trustees, do you have any questions for the superintendent this evening in respect to her report? Trustee McNally and then Trustee Gagnon.
Thank you. I see through the chair to the superintendent, I see that there was lots of meetings and meetings with the representative advisory committee of students. That just leads me to think of, I cannot remember his last name, but Griffin, the student from Ope who wrote to us about his feeling that student representatives should be elected by the student body and not sort of appointed. It's not strictly about the superintendent's report. So if this is the wrong place to ask about follow-up on that, then I'll just leave it. But if it fits in, could I have
Yeah,
some feedback, please?
yeah. So, I mean, we can, you can certainly ask your question, and I'll leave it to the superintendent to answer it now or under trustee questions, which is our next item.
Sure.
So maybe if you
Whatever
don't mind,
works.
we just park that till B, trustee questions. Thank you, trustee McNally.
Absolutely.
All right, trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the superintendent, just looking for a little bit of clarification regarding the school capacity for Tillicum School and likely needing to add 1 to 2 classrooms and just wanting to know what the timeline of that need is.
Thank you. Go ahead, superintendent, if you could respond to that and add any
Sure.
context.
Yep. So we are, as you know, we're going through kindergarten registration, and that determines capacity for next year. In that school specifically, the current kindergarten class is much larger than the outgoing grade 5 class. And so if we anticipate similar numbers for the next school year, we will see a need of 1 additional classroom at least. So we do have conversations that are occurring both at the school level and with PAC around what that may look like. Early conversations right now, but certainly trying to get ahead of it if we anticipate a similar number as we had this year.
Thank you, superintendent. I don't see any other hands. I just had one question of clarification. Well, 2 really. One, again, I guess, taking the sort of Tillicum space issues a little further. I just wondered whether, superintendent, there was any kind of issue with our projections. Like, it sounds like this came out of kind of nowhere, these new students, and that we weren't expecting this level of enrollment. I wonder if we've looked at our enrollment projections for the subsequent years and whether we've recalibrated those projections, or if you can provide us with a little bit of insight into projections for kindergarten at Tillicum.
I'm not sure what the projection is for the kindergarten class. I wonder if Mr. Arts has, Associate Superintendent Arts has, he is the person who most knows the Beauregard.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll look at projections through Beauregard, and they are to be high again, the projections. But as Superintendent Whitten says, we're just finishing kindergarten registration, and the transfer process is coming up. So I'll actually be bringing in the March board or ops meeting data of where registration is at for kindergarten at the end of February in relation to last February and the February before, as well as how many grade 5s are leaving the school, for everyone to see a real good sense of which schools are going to be growing and which aren't. Numbers are just fluctuating right now over the next 2 weeks, but by the end of February, we should be able to have a pretty good idea of where we're at. So yeah, and the projections are always a projection. So I hate to rely too much on them, but these actual registrations should give us a much better sense. And I'll bring that report next month.
Thank you, appreciate that. President Humphries, you had a question?
Sorry, yeah, I just was realizing that I was looking at my notes and totally forgot that I was going to ask about the equity scan very briefly. And maybe we can connect on, offline about it more. But I was just making note that when I was given a list of the district committees and I was trying to sort of orient myself to how everything works, I noticed that there was an equity committee that probably is ad hoc meets, as needed. And I wondered if that's going to be convening now, if there's an equity scan happening and if we can participate.
Thank you, President Humphries. Yeah, Superintendent Whitten, are you able to clarify, because I believe this is a ministry process, is it not? The ministry's equity scan, and so I'm not sure what the ministry's usual process is for conducting an equity scan in a district. Are you able to speak to that, Superintendent?
I can speak to a little bit. The equity scan, yes, they have different groups that participate in discussions and conversations. The interesting part for us moving forward is that we have reached out. Dr. Nemi has reached out and spoken with Joe Heslop, who is the provincial lead for the equity scan, to restart this, but also to restart it with maybe a slightly different plan, and that being really communicating and consulting and talking with the nations on how they may see this equity scan going. And this may be something different, and that would be representing the voices of the four houses and how they might see this looking differently. So that's exciting and a possibility for the future. So we hope to have more information as we move forward, but that was just the early discussion between Dr. Nemi and Mr. Heslop.
Thank you, Superintendent. So I I see your hand, Trustee Painter. You're next on the speakers list. I just wanted to clarify before we move on from this particular line of inquiry that further clarification around the process an update will come back to the board once it's been established along with the timeline. Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Winton. All right, Trustee Painter, the floor is yours.
Just with respect to the equity scan, I just wanted to clarify whether or not this was a restart of the one that I believe I was working with Trustee Whitaker a year or so, 2 years ago, and we had an initial meeting, but didn't move beyond it. Is this the same process that we're doing again?
Superintendent, go ahead.
I believe it's, I want to say the same idea, but I don't know that it's the same process, but yes, yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think it was parked in what, 2020, Superintendent? Yeah. Okay. All right, any other questions for the superintendent in relation to her monthly report? Seeing none, we'll move on to B, which is trustee questions. So trustees, this is your opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. And to the extent possible, staff will try to respond. So again, if I just want to remind trustees that this is also an opportunity under trustee questions. If you do have any further questions you wanted to ask in terms of the music review, this might be an opportunity for you to do so. Okay, so I don't see any hands. So moving on to E2, which is our Secretary Treasurer's report. Oh, pardon me. Let's back up. Let's first receive and vote. You know what, folks? I'm very sorry. We neglected to actually vote. We need a motion to accept the superintendent's report. Thank you, Trustee Guignot. Can I have a second? Thank you, Trustee Kwan. All right, so the motion again is that the Board of Education of Greater Victoria receive the superintendent's report as presented. All those in favor? Thank you, and that is unanimous. Okay, now we can move on. So we're moving on to the Secretary Treasurer's report. And sorry, Trustee Bayo, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, did we finish with the trustee question part, or that's what we just went by?
We did, and I'm sorry, did I miss your hands?
No, I was just curious about Trustee McNally's question from earlier that we were going to look at that point about.
Oh yes, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see Trustee McNally's hand up again, but I should have remembered. It wasn't long ago, was it, Trustee McNally? My apologies. We did want to come back to your question, didn't we? So let's pause at B. Trustee McNally, please, the floor is yours.
Well,
thank you, Trustee Bayo.
Could you just remind me of where we were going with this question?
Superintendent, go ahead.
I can. Trustee McNally, I was going to speak a little bit about student leadership and the student who had come to the meeting before, Griffin. So thank you for bringing that up again. We are, so a couple of things. I know that Mr. Boulding has had conversations with the student, and the leadership circle is continuing. We also are going to be, Mr. Arts, as he is working closely with the secondary principals and vice principals, going to be toward the end of the year looking at student leadership across the district, as it entails many different formats, some of which is a class. in some high schools, some of it is student led with a teacher sponsor, and some of it is more formal. And some of it is less formal or informal, like the circles. At any rate, when we are meeting and discussing this, we will be with the students and their voice, creating a admin procedure so that as we move forward, when changes are being proposed or when students are seeing and wishing for something different, that their voice is kept in the center of this, and also that we have some guiding protocols that we can work with. This will help, I think, for all schools, even though all schools have something slightly different, but it does keep students at the center and maintain their voice, but also give some guidance as schools move through different processes, whether they are moving away from sort of a democratically elected student body, or they have classes, or they have circles. But so we've got two things happening. One is the ongoing conversations with the student at Oak Bay and the principal, and the other is just moving towards having 7 or 8 conversations with the high schools around what they're doing and how we could move that to ensure students are kept at the center and their voices are what leads the student leadership.
Thank you so much through the chair to the superintendent. That yeah, I've either here or in other forums, I've even maybe from a student, I've heard that student voted in representatives are the result. The successful candidate is going to be the result of a popularity contest, and not really if you will, a political representative for students. So it is fraught. And when I brought my motion in 2012 to establish student trustees, I realized that it was going to be difficult, given that high schools here don't have student councils that are political in any way, and maybe no high schools do, I don't know, but that was my hope, that they would be more interested in their own education and elect representatives on that basis. So anyway, it'll be an interesting conversation going forward, and thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Trustee McNally and Superintendent Whitten. I'm glad to hear we're moving forward in a positive way on that. Look forward to hearing more as it develops. All right, folks, thanks. We're now going on, I think, safely to E2, Secretary Treasurer's report. Secretary Treasurer Stride, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I've just included in the agenda pack some of the activities and meetings that have happened over the last month and a half. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer. Trustees, do we have any questions in relation to the Secretary Treasurer's report this month? Don't see any hands. All right, so we can I have a mover for recommending that we receive the Secretary Treasurer's report? Thank you, Trustee Kwan, seconded by Trustee McNally. Any discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? Show of hands. Can I just get hands up one more time? Just want to make sure I don't miss anybody, and that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. All right, so we're moving on to F, question period. I'll turn to staff now. Do we have any questions in the question period inbox? No, thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. No questions tonight. All right, so public disclosure of in-camera items. We have 3 reports this month outlining in camera. These are section 72 reports that you'll see at page 142, 143, and 144 of the packet for your information. Any new business or notice of motions? No, seeing none. May I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Trustee Kwan, and a seconder. Trustee Bio, thank you so much. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. All right. Good night, folks. Have a lovely evening.